Okay, so you want to have an argument with somebody. There's two kinds of arguments you can engage in. There's what we call deductive arguments, which would be the subject of this video, and then there's inductive arguments. For our purposes, it's really important to understand the difference between these two types of arguments, right? So, deductive arguments. When we're talking about formal logic, there's two kinds of arguments. There's deductive arguments and inductive arguments. Deductive arguments are attempts at a proof, right? These are arguments where when our premises are true, our conclusion has to be true. That's what it means, right? When we say we have an argument that's valid, when we're using that word properly within the context of formal logic, what it means for an argument to be valid is that when the premises of our argument are true, they guarantee the truth of the conclusion. More formally, deductive arguments are those such that they're valid if and only if the argument has a formal structure such that it's impossible for the premises to be true while the conclusion of our argument is false. Otherwise, we're going to say we've got an argument that's invalid. Right? So an invalid argument is simply an argument that's not valid, right? An invalid argument is an argument where when the premises are true, sometimes our conclusions can be false, right? Valid arguments are arguments where if the premises are true, conclusion must be true, right? As on the basis of the structure of the argument. So what do I mean? So what I'm saying is when you're looking at a deductively valid argument, you're looking at an argument that's built in a certain kind of way. It doesn't matter if the premises are actually true or actually false. What matters is the relationship between the parts of the argument, right? And there's a whole bunch of arguments that have forms like this. So an example would be like all humans are mortal, Socrates is a human. And if we know that, right? If we know that Socrates is immortal, if we know that mortals are humans, then we just know just by deduction, right? We just know by definition that Socrates is immortal, right? That kind of an argument. When we talk about something that's valid, that's what we're talking about, right? These arguments where, given the premises, the conclusion must be the case. So any argument that's got a structure like that is valid. It's really easy to misunderstand this. So I'm going to go through a couple examples just to make sure that we get the point. I mean, it sounds simple, and it is simple in a lot of ways, but it's really easy to misrepresent this or sort of think you get it and miss something here. So a couple more examples. Steve's a bachelor. Bachelors are unmarried men. We can deduce from that that Steve is unmarried, right? Again, just in virtue of what those words mean, right? If you know that Steve's a bachelor and we know what the word bachelor means, bachelors are unmarried men, right? Our second premise tells us that. Well, if that's our definition of bachelor, then Steve's unmarried in virtue of one, right? Again, given those premises, conclusion has to be true. It would be impossible for the conclusion to be false when those premises are true. That's all it means for something to be deductive. If the premises are true, conclusion must be true. Here's another example, right? NASA faked the moon landing, therefore NASA faked the moon landing. This is a deductively valid argument, right? Like think about our definition. If the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. Our premise and our conclusion here are the exact same thing, right? So anytime our premise is true, our conclusion will be true. It would be impossible for the premise to be true and the conclusion false because they have the same truth value, right? They're either both false or both true. So it's impossible for you to go from a true premise to a false conclusion in this case, right? The formal structure of this argument is just A, therefore A, right? If A is true, A is true. So it has to be valid. Sometimes people, and I'm not sure where this comes from. I think it's because sometimes people talk in mathematics differently about validity. I know the social sciences sometimes use words like deduction and induction and validity different than formal logic does. It's really important if you're thinking about logic within the context of philosophy. Deduction is not when we try to derive the specific from the general. And when I talk about induction in the next video, induction is not inferring the general from the specific. A lot of people say that. There's probably domains of thought where that's the case, but not within the context of philosophical logic. The example I just gave you, right, is not an example of deriving the general from the specific, right? It's an example in which our premise is the exact same as our conclusion, and therefore, if the premise is true, the conclusion is true as well, right? So don't mistake sort of deduction for uh, trying to get to a specific claim from a general claim, and don't think of induction as taking something about the specific and then inferring something about the general. That's not what we're doing here. Here's another argument. Taylor Swift can fly. Anything that's able to fly can shoot lasers from its eyeballs. Therefore, Taylor Swift can shoot lasers from her eyes. Again, you think about our principle. If the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true, right? It doesn't matter what the actual truth value of the premises are here. It's just in a possible world in which they're true, the conclusion would be true. And this is again a case of that, right? If it was the case that Taylor Swift could fly, and if it really was the case that anything that could fly could shoot lasers from its eyes, it would have to be the case that Taylor Swift could shoot lasers from her eyes, right? That's what we're talking about when we talk about validity. If the premises are true, conclusion must be true. Now, what this implies, right, is just because an argument is valid doesn't mean that it's necessarily a good argument, right? If you've got a valid argument and the premises are false, you're going to have an argument where it's just a poor argument, right? And that's okay. So validity is just one feature of an argument. Just because an argument is valid doesn't mean it's a good argument, right? This is, I think, one of my favorite, definitely one of the more common examples used by philosophers to sort of demonstrate validity. The following arguments from Monty Python's Holy Grail. This is an example of a valid argument. So they've caught a woman here. They think she's a witch, and they're going to try to figure out whether or not she is a witch.
May we burn her? Who do you know she is a witch? She looks like one. Bring her forward.
I'm not a witch, I'm not a witch.
But you are dressed as one.
They dressed me up like this. And this isn't my nose, it's a false one.
Well,
We did do the nose
the nose?
and the hat, but she's a witch.
Did you dress her up like this?
No. Yes. Yeah, a bit. She has got a wart.
What makes you think she is a witch?
Well, she turned me into a newt.
A newt?
We got better.
Burn her anyway! There are ways of telling whether she is a witch.
Are there? What are they?
Tell me, what do you do with witches? And what do you burn apart from witches?
More witches!
Wood. So, why do witches burn?
Because they're made of wood.
Good. So, how do we tell whether she is made of wood?
Built a bridge out of her.
Ah, but can you not also make bridges out of stone?
Oh, yeah.
Does a wood sink in water?
No, it floats. It floats over into the pool.
What also floats in water?
Bread, apples, very small rocks, cider, a great gravy, cherries, mud, churches, lead, a duck.
Exactly. So, logically,
If she weighs the same as a duck, she's made of wood.
and therefore...
A witch! A witch!
So that's a valid argument, right? The structure of the argument is something like all witches burn, all things that burn are made out of wood, all things that are made out of wood float in water, all things that float in water weigh the same as a duck. If she weighs the same as a duck, she's a witch. She does weigh the same as a duck, therefore, she's a witch. If all those premises were true, the conclusion would have to be true, right? Therefore, it's a deductively valid argument. Horrible argument. Probably every single premise except for all witches burn is false, but it's a deductively valid argument. So the fact that an argument is deductive or the fact that an argument is valid doesn't make it a good argument, right? Deductive arguments are arguments where we're trying to prove a conclusion, right? They're arguments where if our premises are true, conclusion has to be true. Valid arguments are arguments that succeed at doing that, right? They're an argument that's trying to be deductive, they're trying to be a proof, and they succeed at doing that. They're like, if these premises were true, the conclusion would be true. Invalid arguments are arguments that fail to do that, right? They're attempts at a proof, but there are arguments where if the premises are true, the conclusion doesn't have to necessarily be true. So they are invalid in that sense, right? So yay, it's valid, that's good. That lets us know how to evaluate the argument. We want to know, are these premises true, right? Because if the premises are true, the conclusion would have to be true. So if we think the conclusion is false, we've got to find a problem with one of the premises, right? But the mere fact that it's valid doesn't mean it's a good argument. When we're looking at a deductive argument, what you're looking for is soundness. A sound argument is an argument where it's a deductively valid argument, and we also know that its premises are true, right? Now, given with a deductively valid argument, we know that if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. A sound argument is the gold star of arguments, right? It's an argument where not only do we know that the conclusion's truth is guaranteed if the premises are true, we also know our premises are true. So the conclusion has to be true, right? We've literally proven it if we've got a sound argument. These kind of arguments are extremely rare. And even when we see one, it's even rarer to know that we're actually looking at something sound. But if you find a sound argument, right, like if you concede that an argument is sound, if you concede that it's a deductively valid argument, and you also concede that the premises are true, you have to accept the conclusion of that argument then, or else you're literally being irrational, right? So that's what a deductively valid deductive argument is. So that's this video. We will talk about induction in the next video. Have a good one.